Welcome back to this next video, and in this video I'm going to tell you that why living organisms need a signaling system, because there is no life possible without a signaling system in the living organisms. Imagine what life would be if you and the people around you could not communicate. You would not be able to express your wishes to others, nor could you ask questions to find out more about your environment. So social organization is dependent on communication between individuals, and if the individual they are not able to communicate with each other, the problems of that particular society that would not be solved. So is the social organization that is one of the key things, and that is dependent on communication between individuals that comprise that society, and without communication society would fall apart. Same is true with the cells. So as with people, it is vital for individual cells to be able to interact with their environment, and this communication is if you talk about the unicellular organisms, if you talk about the unicellular cells, this kind of the communication is there. And if you talk about the larger organisms, this kind of the communication is still there. So the communication that is true for the unicellular cells or one of the many cells that form the larger organisms. Now, in order to properly respond to external stimuli, the environment in which the cell is living, the cells have developed complex mechanism of communication. They receive a message from its environment. It's transfer the information across the membrane of the cell, and then they produce changes within the specific cells in response to the message. And this kind of the communication that is very specific. For example, if this is a signaling cell, say for example this is a sending cell, and it is producing some kind of chemicals that is for the communication, we technically call this as a ligand. So if this cell is producing a ligand, for this ligand there is a particular receptor on the target cell. So this target cell, it is going to receive this ligand with the help of this receptor which is present on the surface of this target cell, and then with the help of this receptor, this target cell is going to produce a particular response. We will be discussing a few examples so that you will get the idea what this response means. If this is another cell but this is a non-target cell, this cell is producing this ligand to make a response in this particular target cell. So only this target cell is going to receive this signal with the help of this receptor, as this cell do not want the interaction of this ligand with this particular cell. The strategy which this particular cell apply is that it is not going to produce this receptor on its surface, so this ligand cannot be able to interact with the non-target cell, so there will be no response in this particular cell. As I've told you that the communication that is needed for the unicellular as well as the multicellular organisms. So one of the famous example of the unicellular signaling is the mating of the two haploid yeast cells. Now what you do is that this is one kind of the haploid yeast cell which is usually called as an A cell. This is another kind of the yeast cell which is known as the alpha cell, and only the A and the alpha cell they are going to combine with each other to give you a diploid cell. So how this mechanism is actually achieved? If you look at this particular cell, this is going to produce this signal, and these blue balls, these are the signals, and this alpha cell is going to produce the signal, and these are these red signals over here. The receptor for these red signals they are present on the A cell, you can see these, and the receptor for these kind of the signal they are present on the alpha cells. So these receptors and these signals are actually enabling the interaction of the A and the alpha cell with each other, and we call these signaling molecules as the pheromones. So the A cell is producing pheromone, the alpha cell they are producing the pheromone. The pheromone, this receptor for the A pheromone they are present on the alpha cell. The receptor of the alpha pheromone they are present on the A cell, so they are going to interact with each other to give you to make these projections and thereby mating. So they are converted from the haploid cells into the diploid cell. Same kind of the communication you also see in the multicellular organisms. Now in multicellular organisms, as there are the number of the cells that is more as compared to the unicellular organisms, and multicellular organisms are made up of a large number of cells. So in multicellular organisms, the cells send and receive chemical messages constantly to coordinate the action of the distant organs, the tissues and the cells. As there are different kind of the organs and tissues and cells in the living organisms, so the communication scheme that is present in the multicellular organism, that is more complex as compared to the unicellular organisms. Now the ability of the multicellular organism to send these messages quickly and efficiently, that is enabling the cells to coordinate and fine-tune their functions. Now one of the important example is how the blood sugar level is controlled in different conditions. In some cases the sugar level of the blood that can be low, as it is in the help of the as in the case of the starvation, or it can be very high, as in the case of the fed state. So let us discuss this in a little bit detail, how this mechanism actually works. Now there can be high blood sugar in your blood. There can be a low blood glucose in your blood. Now these are two different conditions. Now both of these conditions, they are actually detected by the part of the brain which is known as the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus is then going to direct the desired cell to produce the desired hormone. Now what I mean by that, like for example, if there is high blood glucose in your blood, the hypothalamus is going to send signal to the pancreas, and it is going to activate the specialized cell in the pancreas which are known as the beta cells. So the hypothalamus is going to send messages to the beta cell of the pancreas to release the hormone which is known as the insulin, and this insulin is going to make the sugar level of the blood to a normal level by the uptake of the high blood glucose by the fat cells. So the insulin, it is going to direct the fat cell to extract the glucose that is extra in their blood, or that is high in their blood, thereby making the normal blood glucose level. Now if the blood glucose level is low and you need to increase the level of the blood glucose to the normal level, what the hypothalamus do, it is going to direct the pancreas and activating another kind of the cell in the pancreas which are known as the alpha cells. Now these alpha cells are going to produce a different kind of the hormone which is known as the glucagon, and the glucagon will be responsible for the release of the glucose from the liver into the blood, thereby maintaining the normal blood glucose level. Now if you see this, in both of the cases we are dealing with the glucose but with their different concentrations, and in both cases the hypothalamus is actually responding to them, but the hypothalamus is going to respond to the hypothalamus activate specific kind of the cells in specific condition. In high glucose condition, it is going to activate the beta cells for the production of the insulin, and in the case of the low blood glucose level, the hypothalamus is going to activate the alpha cells of the pancreas. So this is a very specific kind of the signaling. So the hypothalamus is activating specific kind of the cells that is producing specific kind of the hormone to achieve a normal blood glucose level. So this is actually the coordination you see in the living organisms, that the brain that is involved and the specialized part of the pancreas that are involved in controlling the different scenarios of the blood glucose level in the living organisms, in the human beings, for example. Another important example that you see in the human beings is the birth of a baby, birth of a child. Now, what you do is that when the time of the there is a time of the childbirth, what the head of the baby is doing, that it is going to push against the cervix, which is actually a stimulus, and this push by the head of the baby against the cervix is actually going to send a signal to the brain, and the brain is going to produce a specific hormone which is known as the oxytocin. And what this oxytocin is doing, that it is traveling through the blood and it is going to reach to the uterus, and where this oxytocin is actually responsible for stimulation of the uterine contraction. So here the signal that is generated in the cervix of the female, and the message is sent to the brain. The brain is releasing the hormone, and with the help of the blood it is then able to reach to the uterine walls, causing the contraction. So the effector hormone in this particular case is known as the oxytocin, which is responsible for the uterine contraction. And when this uterine contraction it starts, it is then responsible for release of the more oxytocin by the brain. The more oxytocin is going to release for more contraction of the uterine walls, and this process continue until the baby is born. Now, if you look at this particular example, different kind of the organs of the human beings that are involved. You can see this here, the cervix that is involved, your brain that is involved, the bloodstream that is involved, in the contraction of the cells of the uterine walls that are involved. But as all of these, they are connected to each other by this particular pathway, thereby they are generating the desired response. Now, the ability of cells to communicate through chemical signals, as I've told you, that originated in single cells, as we see that in the mating of the haploid yeast cells, and it was very essential for the evolution of the multicellular organism. Like if you see this particular example, if there was no communication between the cervix and the brain, no communication between the brain and the blood, you will not be able for the birth of a child. But these mechanisms, they are evolved in the multicellular organism to achieve the desired response. Now, this particular communication system in the multicellular organism is efficient, and it is error-free. And these two properties, the efficient and the error-free function of communication system in the multicellular organism, is vital for all life as we know it. So in order to respond to changes in their immediate environment, as I've told you, that the cell they are able to receive the message, they are able to process the message that are present outside their borders. And when these cells they communicate with each other, when these individual cells they receive the signals from their environment or other cells, they integrate the information they receive, and then that is going to make a unified action plan which lead to a functional organisms. And this is a very good example of that, how the different organs and different tissues of the female body that is responsible for the birth of a child. If you like the video, do subscribe to my channel and share it with your friends and colleagues. We will continue the discussion in the next video.